By 1793, France was tearing itself apart. The king had been executed, the Republic was drowning in chaos, and in the southern port city of Toulon, royalist rebels committed the ultimate treason. They handed France's primary naval base, and the entire fleet anchored in the harbor, over to the British military. The government in Paris needed to retake the city immediately, but they were short on competent commanders. In desperation, they handed the artillery operation over to a 24-year-old officer named Napoleon Bonaparte. While other generals might have planned a direct, bloody assault on the heavily defended British fleet, Napoleon looked at the map differently. He realized that if he could just position his cannons on the elevated ridge of Fort Mulgrave, gravity and range would do the rest. The British ships would be sitting ducks. After weeks of bombardment, the British were forced to evacuate. By identifying and controlling the single most important physical variable on the board, a young captain proved that localized, calculated force could stabilize the Republic. 2 years later, he brought that exact same calculation to the streets of Paris. When thousands of royalist rebels marched on the capital to overthrow the government, Napoleon didn't hesitate. He packed his cannons with grapeshot and fired directly into the crowds, shutting down the uprising in a matter of minutes. That efficiency made him the hero of the new government, but he soon outgrew the role of a military savior. Through a combination of rapid battlefield victories and shrewd political maneuvering, he dissolved the Republic entirely, taking the crown from the Pope's hands and placing it on his own head as Emperor of France. He had mastered the art of dominating a single defined space. Now he faced a completely different problem, attempting to rule an entire continent. To see exactly how he managed those variables at his peak, we have to look at the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, where his French army faced a massive, combined Russian and Austrian force. Napoleon intentionally abandoned the high ground, making his flank look weak to bait Allied generals into the valley. It was a trap. As the enemy overextended, he unleashed hidden reserves up the middle, slicing through the center and splitting the Austro-Russian army in half. The coalition collapsed. By manipulating the terrain, calculating movement speeds, and preying on the overconfidence of his enemies, he had orchestrated a perfect victory. But there was one variable he couldn't control: the British Navy. After the French fleet was destroyed at Trafalgar, Napoleon realized an invasion across the English Channel was impossible. If he couldn't beat Britain with cannons, he would have to beat them with economics. This map illustrates his solution: the continental system. He ordered every European nation under his control to stop trading with Britain, cutting off every port and harbor from the Baltic to the Mediterranean, to starve the British economy. An absolute blockade only works with absolute compliance. When Portugal and Spain inevitably smuggled British goods, Napoleon sent his armies in to enforce the rules. Instead of a swift victory, his troops got bogged down in a years-long guerrilla war that drained French resources. He was treating the European economy like a battlefield he could command. By trying to manage macroeconomics across borders, he surrendered the tight, localized control that once made him invincible. That scaling problem reached its breaking point in 1812. When the Russian Tsar resumed trading with Britain, Napoleon responded by assembling the largest military force Europe had ever seen, an army of 600,000 men marching straight toward Moscow. His traditional strategy relied on moving fast and feeding his troops using the resources of the conquered land. The Russians simply refused to play his game. They retreated deep into their vast territory, burning their own farms, villages, and grain silos along the way, leaving the French with nothing to eat. When winter hit, temperatures plummeted to minus 30 degrees Celsius. The retreat became a graveyard. Out of the 600,000 soldiers who marched into Russia, only about 5,000 made it back in fighting condition. The Russian environment was simply too vast for the rapid strike tactics that worked on the smaller battlefields of Europe. His ambition had scaled beyond his logistical capacity. That devastating loss shattered the illusion of French invincibility. Recognizing his weakness, Britain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia formed a massive coalition, overwhelming his newly recruited army through sheer numbers at the Battle of Leipzig. He was forced to abdicate and sent into exile. But he famously escaped, returning to power for a frantic 100 days. His luck had finally run out. At Waterloo in 1815, thick mud slowed his artillery, and Allied reinforcements arrived just in time to deliver his final defeat. This time, the coalition made sure he couldn't return. They shipped him thousands of miles away to St. Helena, a remote, rocky island in the middle of the South Atlantic. The man who once dictated terms to emperors spent his final years pacing a damp house. His tactical genius was eventually suffocated by the endless geopolitical chain reactions his own ambition created. Napoleon's military empire collapsed within his lifetime, but his civilian footprint proved permanent. This document is the Code Napoleon. Established in 1804, it threw out centuries of chaotic feudal rules and replaced them with a unified system of civil law. It stated that government jobs should be awarded based on merit and education, not noble birth, a structural framework that still underpins the legal systems of dozens of countries today. His campaigns also inadvertently birthed modern nationalism. By dissolving old monarchies and redrawing borders, he taught populations across Europe to identify as citizens of a shared nation, rather than subjects of a king. While unchecked ambition destroyed the emperor, the administrative systems he established provided the functional structure for the modern nations that rose in his wake.